Thank you very much for joining us. I wanted to ask you, when you won the Innovators Award last night, you talked about Los Angeles as how it's changed as a literary landscape and community, and I wanted to ask for your thoughts on that.
Well, it's been a place that people have written about, but for years it was thought of as really a movie town and people didn't read. I mean, you heard that all the time, but it turns out not to have been true. I don't know whether you remember Dutton's bookstore, but
very well.
It was a huge venue, and then of course the Los Angeles Times took an interest and started the book awards, and now the book fair has come along, and it's revealed that it wasn't a place with no readers. There just had not been a place to congregate them. So they are now out in full force, and the Bookworm radio show, I think, has also been a big focus. It's one of the few really serious book programs in the country, and he's been doing that for years, Michael Silverblatt. In fact, I did his show just after the earthquake. Remember the earthquake?
Very well, in 1994.
We soldiered on. We did the show. So now I think people realize that this is a big book town.
Now, you won a book prize in 1986 for fiction for The Handmaid's Tale, and then have come back. What was your experience of that? That was a real validation of the book.
Yes, well, when The Handmaid's Tale was published, a number of people didn't know what to think of it, including the reviewer for the New York Times, who was unconvinced by the thought that women's reproductive rights would ever be questioned in the United States.
It's a shocking idea.
Well, yeah. So and also various other things about it. So it wasn't a good review, and that of course was dispiriting to the publishers. But then along came the Los Angeles Times to the rescue, and gave it their stamp of approval with the Best Fiction Award, which was very cheering to everyone.
Were some of the reservations about that book had to do also with its its so-called blurring of the line, right? The idea that it was literary fiction that was delving into the realm of speculative fiction.
No, I don't think it had anything to do with that. And it was reviewed different ways in different places. For instance, in England, when it first came out, it was seen as jolly good yarn, because they'd already had their religious civil war back in the 17th century, so I don't think they felt they would ever have another one. In Canada, in their nervous way, they said, could it happen here? And in the United States, particularly on the West Coast, they said, how long have we got?
Right, well that makes sense. And England had its tradition in terms of, say, books like 1984, Brave New World, of those kind of dystopian futuristic novels.
Yeah, Brave New World, by the way, was very inspired by Los Angeles.
Yes, I know that,
indeed.
Yeah. And he later became, he was a critic of Los Angeles in his first stint here, and then he left, and when he came back, after he came back in 1939, he became a great devotee of Los Angeles. In fact, died here. What are some of the Los Angeles books or writers that you admire?
Well, of course, Nathaniel West. We all read that pretty early on, and Joan Didion, classic, and our very own Raymond Chandler. I say our very own, people in crime fiction, of people who read crime fiction and review it as I do. Raymond Chandler is one of the iconic figures of American crime fiction.
Yeah, and I think also of Los Angeles literature. You've been publishing recently with Byliner. You've been doing Positron as a serial novel. You've done 3 installments, and I know a 4th one is in the works. I'm curious both about your experience of publishing digitally and also about the experience of writing a serial novel. You mentioned last night that you're writing it in real time, so you're literally making it up as you go along.
Yeah, so to explain to people, Byliner is an online site, and you can find it on Twitter under The Byliner. And it has brought back a space for longer, serious nonfiction. So the larger, longer articles. It's created more space for them, and longer, serious fiction, which used to be quite prevalent in glossy magazines, and then that market more or less evaporated, except in the New Yorker and a couple of other places. And that kind of writing migrated to usually university-based, university-run quarterlies, or things like maybe the Paris Review. So Byliner has created a space online where this kind of writing can now exist and become available. And therefore I'm all for it, because it creates another market for writers. Serialization of the Dickensian kind, by which I mean you don't necessarily know in installment number 1 what is going to happen in installment number 5. And that's what he was doing. He was putting out things called numbers, in which maybe 3 chapters would be put out as a pamphlet, and how people responded to those determined in part how the story went. So it's more like, the model is more like daytime serial television, which modeled itself upon that kind of thing rather than upon a novel of, say, an early 20th century kind, viewed as an art object, all complete in one. So I've been doing that, and it's a lot like whitewater canoeing.
Well,
this is exciting, scream a lot, and you have to go faster than the water or you're going to smash into a rock.
Has it been your experience that you've been responding in terms of that reader response has influenced the way you think about subsequent installments?
Well, the first kind of thing you're looking for is of course, are people responding to it by acquiring it? You know, that's number 1. And then number 2, are you getting messages, for instance, on your Twitter and so forth, of what is going to happen next? So if you've ever been an entertainer of small children, or for instance, as I did, run your own puppet show, or been a summer camp counselor, or any of those things, you know that you can continue an amusing story from night to night for your audience, which might be little children or somebody else, as long as you leave it at an exciting moment. So that rule is the same whether it's stories around the campfire, or Sherlock Holmes, or Charles Dickens, or any of those things. And Stevenson wrote Treasure Island in chapter installments, which he read out loud to his family circle. And as long as they were interested, he knew he was on the right path, as long as they wanted to know what happened next.
Thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.